what we've heard in the last 2 weeks and how I think we ought to be approaching this. We have heard from many people over the last 2 weeks. There are strong feelings on both sides. We have received a petition from a large number of people supporting the code as it is today. In fact, I think that petition was bigger than the petition of the people who want to increase the parking. So if we're going to fight this out by petitions, the people supporting the current code have a bigger petition. But of course, I don't think that's the way we should approach this. We fully understand the cost of parking. Nobody should have any doubts about that. We understand the cost of parking, and someone suggested that we should overpark, and we definitely don't want to overpark because that is money which can go towards beautifying a project, improving the project, making the project better. So we don't want that money to go over parking, but we also want to require that a project is adequately parked. And that's a very fine line, one which is probably impossible to attain. But over the last 2 weeks, I have not really discovered, because I was already aware of this. I think that there are important structural issues in our parking which need to be addressed, such as the poor utilization of garages and the failure to provide free parking as required by the code. We have underutilized garages. We have underutilized private garages, which are going unused. And if we could figure out a way to do some kind of a public-private partnership with that, we could solve part of our problem. Signage is another area that needs to be improved. As Vice Mayor Janik has indicated, our tourist maps often don't indicate the location of parking garages on our maps. So if you're some poor tourist trying to find a parking garage, God help you if you've got a map and you're trying to find a place to park, because the map isn't going to help you. Now, we've talked to the staff extensively over the last couple of weeks. We've made these suggestions to improve our situation, and maybe some of them will work, maybe some of them won't work. But we think that we should try to take some action on some of these things we've suggested to staff, and that we should come back in 6 months, revisit any progress that are made on those issues, and then look at this issue again, because it's really important that we get it right. One of the things that I came across when I was studying this issue is that the Walker 2015 parking report stated that there are 3 essential elements to parking. One of them is inexpensive parking, one of them is convenient parking, and one of them is sufficient parking. And the report says you can have 2 of those 3. You can't have all 3. And we've chosen to have inexpensive parking, which basically means free parking. And so that means necessarily our parking is going to either be insufficient or inconvenient. And I think we've tacitly chosen to make it sufficient but inconvenient, since much of it is located in garages that people don't want to use, or is possibly too far away, or is just hard to get to. So you're never going to get all 3. The people who want sufficient parking, convenient parking, and free parking, sorry to tell you, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get all 3. So that's policy choice for us here and for the people of the city. So although I'm asking, some of the commentators mentioned we are asking for a 6-month study while we make some improvements and look farther down the road for what other improvements we can make. But that does not mean we are kicking the can down the road. We're going to expect action from staff on the things we've discussed with them, and we're going to take steps, I hope we're going to take steps tonight to improve the situation. In the meantime, we are not going to pass any projects, or at least I'm not going to pass any, which are underparked. Many people have pointed to the Kimsey and said, you know, look at the Kimsey. It has very sufficient parking. And there are several other projects that have sufficient parking. And frankly, I think that's the way that many projects are going to go. So the possibility that some project is going to come forward, which is based strictly on the code, I really don't think that's going to happen. And if it does happen, it's probably not going to get through the council. So our idea is to make certain changes to the text amendments that's put forward, and we will work through those with the mayor and make our changes as they come up. But that's our take on this, or at least that of me and Councilmember Whitehead and I think Councilmember Janik. We want to try to make some improvements because some people have suggested that underutilized garages are somehow separate from multifamily housing. And none of these problems are separate from each other. If we have underutilized garages, that means we have cars on the street. And if we have other assets that are not being used, that are putting more cars on the street, that's a problem. And the multifamily housing, as people have suggested tonight, if they're not adequately parked, those are going to put cars on the street. So it all comes out to the same place, which is more cars on the street. And if we can attack some of these problems and fix some of them, we'll have less cars on the street and less to worry about. So, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I will